In times of trauma and adversity, we must create space for connection by sharing a story of hope. Welcome to Stories of Hope Worldwide, hosted by Kerry Atherton. This podcast shares inspiring stories of individuals who have faced significant challenges and emerged stronger, offering hope and resilience to listeners all over the world. Join Kerry, the founder of Stories of Hope, every week to hear these remarkable journeys and find strength to overcome your adversity. Now, let's listen in to this week's conversation.
Welcome to another episode of Stories of Hope Worldwide. I'm Kerry Atherton and I'm your host. And today's guest is Dinesh Palipana. Dinesh is 2021 Queensland Australian of the Year. He is a doctor, a lawyer and a disability advocate. Around 12 years ago, halfway through medical school, Dinesh was involved in a car accident that would change his life forever. In the middle of that accident, he created a perception that would help him not only survive, but go on to not be destroyed by the trauma, despite being left a paraplegic. His is an inspirational story of hope. Welcome, Dinesh.
Hey, Kerry. Thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
I know. And I have too, since I heard you share your story at the Sunshine Coast Community Awards.
Oh, yes. It was really nice. I love the Sunshine Coast community there. I don't know. I think when we think about all communities these days, Sunshine Coast just has that warmth and that sense of care for each other, which I love it.
Wow, that's great to hear that. I haven't heard that from any outside areas. So to know that we're perceived like that is a really great thing.
Yeah, at least by me.
Yeah, and that's something that I really try and create here on the coast. Because incidentally, we may touch on mental health today, and I'll give a suicide trigger warning right now. But incidentally, here on the Sunshine Coast, our rate of suicide is 9% above the national average.
Wow.
So it's really great to be able to get stories out from the Sunshine Coast and from people around Queensland to other parts of the world, but especially here where we really need it a lot. I was just so inspired by your story, Dinesh, and you just talk about so many things that I love so much. And, kindness, inclusion, resilience and hope are key factors that really came out of your story. And it was quite evident that you have built up a resilience over a lifetime, and that came from your childhood. And before we go on and talk about the life-changing moment of that accident and that amazing perception that you were able to create for yourself, I'm just wondering if you can take us back to that childhood that framed your resilience.
Yeah, I mean, I had a pretty good childhood overall. My mom, she's always been amazing. She's always protected me from everything, and she's given me the best life. So I've had a good childhood. I've had a good life, but I grew up in a time of turmoil. So in Sri Lanka, when I was growing up, there was a war between the Sinhalese and Tamil people. There was a political war as well. So this was an incredibly violent time. When I was a kid, I've seen so much death and violence and some brutal things as well. People beheaded and people burnt alive and things like that. So it was a really rough time for people living in Sri Lanka. And the thing is, it's still like that around the world today, right? There are so many parts of this world where we don't get to live in the beautiful Sunshine Coast or the Gold Coast. So I grew up amongst that, and even among the struggle and the turmoil, my mum was very protective. She was great. She gave me a good life, and even though I have memories of all those things, I still don't have any. How do I put it? I guess I don't. I still feel like I had a good childhood amongst all that. I saw a lot of poverty. I think I lived among some of the poorest people on this planet, people who live on less than $1 a day and don't have homes and don't have shoes and don't have food and don't have all these things that we take for granted. So I got to experience that, and not experience it, but at least see it and live amongst it. And it's one of the reasons I think that I'm so grateful today, because, if you look at where we live, if you look at all the things we still have a lot, right? We still have electricity, we still have food, we still have all this stuff. So I think it really made me feel grateful. But we moved from Sri Lanka when I was 10 years old. Actually, we landed in Australia on my 10th birthday. We lived in Sydney for a little bit and then moved to Byron Bay. And that's where I did most of my growing up as a teenager. It was a beautiful part of the world to spend your teenage years in. And then Brisbane, and that was it. That's when I became an adult. Or I don't know, my girlfriend says that I'm still a big kid, but
And that's good, hey?
exactly.
Yeah, a good thing. Yeah, I love it how you talk about the gratitude, and it's probably hard to grow up in the midst of seeing that extreme poverty and the things that you saw and not develop an attitude of gratitude.
Yeah.
And I do a lot of work with victims of trauma in my job as a counsellor and a mental health first aid trainer, and I'm an ambassador for a PTSD organisation named Fearless. And that gratitude is one of the, which I'm sure you'll agree as you've talked about it, one of the greatest factors for helping people heal from hard times.
Yeah. And I think at the very least, it's a tool in our toolbox to keep us moving forward. That perspective has been a really important thing for me, because even when I put my shoes on every day, I remember that there are kids without shoes. There are people that won't eat. There are people that won't have the internet. There are all these people. And I also think about people that have spinal cord injuries like me around the world. I mean, I am very lucky to have had the spinal cord injury in a country like Australia, where there's world-class medical care, world-class rehabilitation. I have a wheelchair, I have the NDIS, I have all this stuff. So I get to live a pretty good life in amongst all of it. So, I think keeping that perspective is really important. And it also, we as a country, Australia, I know we sometimes complain about things, but at the end of the day, this is a country that everyone in the world flocks to because we have such a good life, right? We have such a beautiful country. But I think for us, if we remember to have that perspective, I think we'll appreciate Australia more, and that's how we will flourish more.
Yeah, well said. You are also the author of a book called Stronger. And I don't know if you've got a copy there for us, but we'll tell everyone how they can get the book, because I'm telling everybody out there you must read this book. But on the front, Dinesh, you've got How Losing Everything Set Me Free.
Yeah.
And I think that that's absolutely incredible. And I've interviewed a lot of people who said that they wouldn't change the circumstances that they went through because it led them to their greatest purpose ever.
Yep.
But with that title, something I'd really love to talk about now, as we get into talking about that night where the accident happened, something that people who face trauma have to do to be able to move forward is to grieve the past life that they had. And yeah, and I love it how you said how losing everything set me free. So I'm wondering if you can give us a brief snapshot of just a few years before your accident, what life was like.
Yeah. You've just given me something to think about. But I think there were 2 times in my life where this happened.
Yeah.
The first time is I had depression, and you and I talked briefly about mental health before we started the podcast. But I had depression. It was a very, very dark period of my life, and I always say that it was more paralyzing than the spinal cord injury ever has been. So depression, I had depression, and I had an anxiety disorder and a panic disorder, and it was tough. It was tough. And actually, one of my biggest fears is going back to that place. So when I came out of the depression, though, I let my old life go, and I became a new person. I think that we end up hanging on to so many things that we think are important in our lives, like whether it be our material stuff or whether it be social status or job titles or whatever. But I think at the end of the day, it doesn't, none of that really matters.
Yeah.
And you have to end up losing all of those things to really find your true self. And that's what I had to do. With depression that happened, and I found myself And then I found my passion, which ended up being medicine. But then I had the car crash as well. And then I lost everything again. I lost the way I was and I lost everything. And before this, I was a 25-year-old guy who was running around playing basketball and just living a life, traveling, going to medical school. So life was really good. And then suddenly it all just changed with the accident. But like you said, now I wouldn't change it for the world because there's this beautiful haiku in Japanese, and it says that my barn having burnt down, I can now see the moon. I think your barn just sometimes has to burn down before you can see the sky, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of like what I wanted to portray with the book, with the light bulb moments, is because people don't have to wait until the barn burns down, do they? It's
Exactly.
This is like stories of a wake-up call, and it's really an early intervention and a prevention tool, because I sit with people after the barn has burnt down and help them rebuild their life, and so often I think to myself that if they'd only heeded a wake-up call or looked at things or listened to that inner voice or listened to the loved ones around them that were saying, "Hey, something needs to change," that some things could have been prevented. I mean, not always, but
Yeah. But we get so caught up in this life, right? We get so caught up and you spend every day not really, well, I know I was there and I spent a lot of days just not being mindful about
yeah,
how easy is it to get caught up in the machinery of the world. Like you just sit in the traffic, you drive to work, you just pay the bills, and then like it's easy to get into the wheel of life and get lost. And even at work, it happens. Like we get caught up in the things that really don't matter, like in healthcare even. So I think we just have to be a bit more mindful sometimes and just think about our purpose a bit more frequently and think about what's important. So I was at the wake for, he was a pretty important figure in my journey. He was the professor who led the School of Medicine or the health group in our university. And he had the final tick to get me back into medical school.
right.
And he passed away, I think it was a week or two ago. But at his funeral, they mentioned this story of how he let me back into medical school. And they said that, that they told him about the rules and it might be an issue, but eventually he just said, we'll just break the rules and we'll make it happen. And at his wake, there were all these people, and we were all just celebrating his life, just talking about what a good man he was. And we were talking about how he's done things for all of us. And, what I realized was that none of his stuff was there. His belongings weren't there. No one cared about, I don't know how much money he had or whatever. But actually, what was there was a way more powerful legacy of the people that he's touched. It just made me think about what's actually important in our lives and just made me think about what we need to spend our lives doing. And I think until these things happen, I wasn't so mindful about my life.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for sharing that. That's like so inspiring hearing that. So, are you able to take us back to the day your barn burnt down?
Yeah, yeah.
That amazing perception that carried you through what was to come.
Well, I had a nice barn. The barn was good. I was happy in my barn. And one day I went to visit my mum in Brisbane. So I lived in Gold Coast then, and I went to visit my mum in Brisbane, and I was driving back. And I often think about sliding doors moments or fate or destiny or whatever it might be that we call it. And I decided to leave the house at a particular time on a particular day. And then I took a particular road and all these things were not things that I normally do. But that day I
Wow.
took a different road and I left at a different time, and I came up to this place on the highway which had roadworks and it was wet and it was dark, and my car aquaplaned and had a rollover. So the car, interestingly, it spun and spun and spun and eventually started rolling nose to tail because it went up an embankment and then came back down. So it was actually flipping through the air front to back. And it was one of the most violent experiences that I've ever had. So the glass was exploding and things were flying around the cabin, and it was really, really violent. But I read this book once, and it was called The Diamond Cutter. And it was written by a Buddhist monk who left his monastery and eventually became a businessman in the diamond business. But he applies these Buddhist philosophies to business and draws parallel to it. But one of the things that he talked about is that when you get a diamond from the ground, it's actually not that beautiful. It's a rock, and it can be dirty, and it's you might not even think that it's a diamond. But if you give it to a diamond cutter who knows what they're doing, they'll cut it in just the right way, where if you hold it up to the light, it'll just sparkle and it'll be beautiful, and it's amazing. So what he says is that our experiences in this life are like a diamond, and we can choose to take that diamond and cut it into any shape that we want, and we can make anything beautiful. So when my car was rolling, it was the first time I actually applied that philosophy. When it was flipping through the air, I just thought, I was scared, right? I thought I was going to die. I didn't know what was going to happen to me, so I was terrified. As the car was flipping through the air, I was hanging upside down, and I just thought, you know what? I don't want to be scared anymore. I can't be scared. I don't know what will happen, and I don't know if I'll die, but I'm not going to spend my last moments being scared. I'm just going to have fun and pretend I'm in a roller coaster. So for the last part of the accident, I was just having a blast. I thought I was in a roller coaster, and that's how I dealt with that situation. And when I think about the accident, I don't actually have any ill thoughts. I don't have any fears. I don't have anything like that. I just think, oh, well, actually, I got photos of the car, and I just think it looks kind of cool because it's such a wreck. But yeah, it was when the car landed that I tried to get up, and I realized I was paralyzed. And I think, you know, that's when the fear kicked in again.
Yeah. Wow, that I mean, I could listen to that over and over again. The mind is just such a powerful thing, isn't it? And triggers for trauma, sufferers is the thing that, often prevents them or keeps them stuck in the pain of the past. Something that I say to everyone I work with is perception is everything. The fact that you read that book, so the power of words, the power of storytelling, that literally was the thing that was just so life-changing for you in your most life-changing moment.
Yeah, and I think that was a really weird time to do it, to apply that philosophy. But then I think actually it's probably the best time to do it. That's when it counts.
Yeah. So because you created that perception, has that enabled you to have no fear when you have got back into a car driving since?
Yeah, I mean, so I don't drive. I fly, by the way. So
Okay. Okay.
I decided to go straight to airplane. I took a first flying lesson last year.
Wow. So you fly. You actually.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
But they have a flying school for people with spinal cord injuries in Melbourne. So I started doing that last year. I'd only taken one flight so far, but it was great. But when I got back into a car, like probably the first couple of weeks was a bit hairy.
Yeah.
I also read once that courage is not the absence of fear, but it's the willingness to face that fear and work through it. So I just, I did it a couple of times, and then it's fine. Like, I love being on the road now. I love cars. I love being on the road.
Wow, that's so great. I was involved in a frightening car accident. Fortunately, I escaped with just severe whiplash. But at the end of the accident, the car we had been rolling all over the road, and at the end of the accident, the car had taken off and was facing a power pole right in front of my face, and we stopped about that far from the power pole. And all I can remember was thinking, oh no, I can't believe I'm in a car accident. And I didn't have any epiphanies like you did. But what I saw that second after we stopped was these four white shields of white light just come down like this in between the car and the
Gosh.
yeah, but I found it very hard to drive again, and especially with merging traffic. And I think had I had a different perception, I mean, I'm a counsellor and I work on exposure therapy and everything, so trying to give myself a new perception, but it's taken a long time. So I think that it's absolutely incredible that you're able to do that and able to get back into a car and be okay with that. That's really powerful for people that are listening today that have been through any kind of trauma.
I think with these things, I think it's really useful to equip ourselves with strategies to deal with the hard times in life and to deal with the things that are thrown our way. But in the unexpected times when we are faced with these challenges, I often think for a person, it's the hardest thing they'll go through in their life. So, whatever it might be. And I don't think there's often a right or wrong way to do it right. I think it's just using whatever tools can help to get you through, and that's it. So I often don't think that there's a right or wrong way to go through something like this, because I come across people that have had spinal cord injuries, and over the last couple of years, I've even seen a couple of little kids that have had spinal cord injuries, and it's so heartbreaking and heart wrenching. But I just don't, and everyone deals with it differently, and I think that's okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think there's one way to deal with it. So
And you're
yeah.
an AR doctor, so you're seeing people every day that are faced with the unexpected.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I see people all the time. I see people that go through all sorts of different trauma. I just think that for this person right now, this is the biggest thing that's happening to them. And I just, and everything's relative, right? Everything is relative, so I just think, there's no right or wrong way.
And that's the thing, like you said, what is traumatic to one person might not be a traumatic event to someone else. Trauma looks different for everyone.
Yeah, exactly.
Dinesh, where does your head go on the hard days? And I want to talk about the strategies that you have in place in the toolkit to pull
Yeah.
out.
Thank you. That's an amazing question. So one of the things, actually, it's very simple. It's the Simpsons and ice cream. So sometimes,
Tell me more.
yeah. So I have this. I get some low calorie ice cream, so at least it's somewhat better than the sugar filled stuff.
Yeah.
But on some days, I just get home from work and I just throw on the Simpsons, which I really like, because it's like
Oh,
just lighthearted, right? And it's funny, and then I just eat ice cream. And my girlfriend sometimes calls because we're on different shifts, and she's like, "You're watching The Simpsons and eating ice cream, aren't you?" And yeah, so having simple things like that, whatever it might be for each of us. Like I know some of my colleagues go for a run, they go to the gym, they play with their dog, or whatever it might be. It's nice to have something like that that just helps you chill. Other things, I think I have grown to love the hard days. So,
wow. That's great.
well, one of the things that I, I I hate flying. Okay, so I hate flying, and I hated flying for the longest time. But then I thought, man, you know what? I need to figure out a way where I can make this a good experience for myself. So I bought a big pair of headphones. I bought a phone with a bigger screen, and I bought a bunch of books on it, and I put a bunch of music on it. And now I love flying because it's a hour or two or more where I can just chill out in a cocoon and just be by myself. So one of the things I do is just read books when I fly. And some of the books I read lately, one is called The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. And he talks about how sometimes the hardships and the hard path and the rocks in our path is the way. And he gives this story of a king who, I'll probably get this story wrong, but essentially there was a king who put a rock on a road and hid a bunch of treasure under it in the middle of the road. And then there was a lot of people that walked around the rock. There was a lot of people that avoided the rock. And then one person actually made a huge effort and moved the rock out of the way and found the treasure. But what he was saying is sometimes the hardships is the way. So there are some days when I have really long nights at work, or like where there's so many things happening, But I know that when I come out of that, I feel so good, and it feels like it just feels amazing. So I've grown to love the hard days for that reason. And again, it's just been about training my brain, I suppose, to think about things differently.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. Training your brain to think about things differently. I was just thinking when you were talking, because I've been through some extremely hard times in my life. Something that I've always told myself is that if we don't have the hard times, we would never appreciate the good times.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and sometimes when the times have been hardest, and I felt like I've been defeated the most, one of the gifts that I have is to be able to go back and look at what I've already come out of and know that if I've overcome those things in the past, that I can overcome even greater in the future.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so, it just reminded me when you were saying that. Dinesh, what would you say to the person who is watching today and despite what they're going through, they've really hit rock bottom, they feel totally hopeless and like, "How am I gonna go on for another day? How can I move forward?"
Yeah. I wish I could promise you that life is going to be a straight road. I wish I could promise you that the days will always be bright, but I can't. I wish I could, but what I can promise you is that you have it inside of you to do this. And you don't have to know how. You don't have to know how. You don't have to know how to keep going, and that's okay. And you don't have to smile all the way through it. You don't have to do any of that. What I beg you to do is just to keep going, just to keep going. My mom, I heard her saying, and I'm talking to someone because after the accident happened, it was just me and her, and we had some tough days. We had no money. Some days we didn't know we were going to live the next day, so it was hard. I heard her talking to someone recently, and she told them that I always told him that we'd be okay, even if I didn't know how. So she didn't know how we were going to make it in her mind, but she always told me that we'd be okay. So you don't have to know how, you just have to keep going. And that's enough some days.
Oh, that's so great. Mums, hey?
Arms are the best.
Yeah, I know. Dinesh, what's been your greatest light bulb moment? It's a big question, that one, isn't it, to just pull out of thin air, but maybe
But
something stands out?
I think the light bulb moment has been realizing that it's just been a chain of things, and it's been the daily things that have made me who I am and will make me who I am in the future. And I think it's been about the little habits and the consistency. You know, when I was going through medical school, I had this big goal, but it was just about the simple things that I did every day. So when I was in the shower, I used to put on a medical podcast and listen to it for a few minutes. You know, when I was somewhere, I just did something to make myself better at medicine at least 1% every day. So it's taking those little steps. And today I keep track every day. I try to read 5 pages of a book. Every day I spend a couple of minutes meditating, spend a couple of minutes. So I actually have an app that keeps track of my little habits like that.
Great.
Because, so I think the light bulb moment has been realizing that actually it's a collection of those little things over time that build us up to where we are eventually.
That's great. And before we finished, we talked at the beginning about a lot of things that you're passionate about. You're passionate about disability, inclusion, you're a humanitarian, you're a lawyer, you're a doctor. Is there anything that you aren't? But what with all that, taking all that into consideration and where we are in the world right now, faced with so much uncertainty and people needing hope, what would be your message for the world?
I think now more than ever, we just need kindness. I know it sounds so cliched and simple, but like it's so important just to be kind to each other. And being kind to another person, I think, is being kind to ourselves. And if we were just kind to each other, I think the wars would be less. I think we'd prosper more. I think we'd go forward more as a society, and we'd help each other through so many of these things, like the challenges that we go through, the depression that we experience. So I think kindness is what we need more than ever today. So please be kind to each other.
I love that. Well, thank you, Dinesh. It's been an absolute honour talking to you today and having you share your story of hope with us.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. See you soon.
Thank you for listening to Stories of Hope with Kerry Atherton. If this conversation helped you, please consider sharing the podcast with a friend or leaving a rating and review on your podcast player. If you'd like to find out more about Kerry Atherton, head to storiesofhope.com.au, where you can purchase her books or find her next event. Check the show notes for links and information about our guest in this episode, and remember, you don't have to walk your path alone.